Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to welcome you to the first CFNC Spanish Services webinar focused on supporting Hispanic students' access to higher education. This webinar series was created in partnership with other organizations and institutions in an effort to help address the questions, challenges, and concerns of school counselors, educators, college access professionals, pre-college program professionals, and just anyone that's working in the community with the Hispanic or Latino population. We will be providing a total of 6 webinars. This webinar is an introduction to identifying barriers and exploring best practices to support Hispanic Latino students' access to higher education. In this webinar, we will identify common barriers faced by Hispanic Latino students in accessing higher education. We will discuss the current college enrollment and attainment demographics for Hispanic Latino students in the United States and in North Carolina. We will discuss some best practices to support student enrollment and success. Additionally, successful strategies to support DACA and undocumented students, college enrollment, and financial support will also be shared. We hope that participants will leave with the tools and resources to better support Hispanic Latino students in your schools and in your communities. The webinar series is being provided to you by College Foundation of North Carolina in addition with other partners as mentioned earlier. For those of you who may not be aware or familiar with CFNC, College Foundation of North Carolina is a 6-way partnership comprised of College Foundation Incorporated, Department of Public Instruction, the North Carolina Community College System, the North Carolina Independent Colleges and Universities, the North Carolina State Education Assistance Authority, or SCAA, and the University of North Carolina. CFNC officially is an information dissemination program of SCAA, and the main purpose of CFNC is to help North Carolinians plan, apply, and pay for college. This collaborative effort involves working together to provide a comprehensive website and a call center staffed with college planning and financing specialists. CFNC offers a number of activities or a number of opportunities for counselors and students across the state of North Carolina, and this includes providing CFNC information sessions, financial literacy, online courses and or workshops, training or webinars for multiple audiences in addition to financial aid workshops. Furthermore, we offer, we have participated in college fairs and career fairs, college, counselor training workshops, in addition to residency determination, and talking about the North Carolina 529 College Savings Plan. All of these workshops or sessions are provided by the regional representatives. Many of you may have already been working with your regional reps, but if not, you can definitely reach out to them and get connected, and they could come to your schools and provide a session for you all. I have had the pleasure of meeting several of you, but for those of you that have not met me or do not know me, my name is Juana Hernandez Urquiza. I am the CFNC State Representative for Spanish Services. I have been in this role for a little over a year now. Prior to coming to work at College Foundation, I worked in a number of organizations working in education and college access, including Communities and Schools of Wake County. I worked for the North Carolina Society of Hispanic Professionals as one of their graduation coach or graduate. I worked for the Juntos program for several years, and I also have done work with Haven House Services. So I have been working for many years with the community, working with parents and education and in college access. And I'm really fortunate to continue my work here with College Foundation. With me is my colleague Javier Gonzalez, who's going to be co-presenting this webinar with me. Javier Gonzalez is the Chief Operating Officer for East Coast Migrant Head Start Project. Javier is going to share a little bit more about his background and his work, but I just want to thank Javier for joining us for this webinar, and I'm excited to hear him and his knowledge. He has a tremendous amount of knowledge and as he's worked with the population for many years. So I'll pass it on to Javier now.
Thank you, Juana. As Juana mentioned, my name is Javier Gonzalez. I am Chief Operating Officer with East Coast Migrant Head Start Project. Our agency is a nonprofit that provides early learning support services to children of migrant and seasonal farm worker families. Along with that, we also provide advocacy, support, and resources to empower the families so that they can become better advocates for their children as they transition into the public school system.
What we will be covering during the webinar, we will be discussing different terms and statuses. We will provide some data on national and state demographics as far as attainment, enrollment, in addition to identifying common barriers faced by the Hispanic Latino students in accessing higher education and best practices to support student success. And lastly, we will explore strategies and share some resources with you all that you could share with your families, your students, or your colleagues that are also working with students. So during the webinar, we will be discussing the different terms, Hispanic, Latino, Latina, Latinx, and then Latino with the @
These terms can be used interchangeably. The more traditional Hispanic is a term that is most widely utilized because it came about through government influence. It was proposed and used to identify individuals from Hispanic background in the census. The Latino term it's more specific to countries of origin. What I like to distinguish between these two terms is that Hispanic references people that come from Spanish-speaking countries, not necessarily certain regions, whereas Latino are specific to regions. So as a rule of thumb, Hispanic is language and Latino is region or country of origin. Latinx was a movement to become more inclusive. That is a more contemporary term that is being used currently. That is an effort, again, to become more inclusive and not be defined by gender or stereotypes, which leads us to the last term there, Latin with the @ that transition into Latinx because of its connotation to gender biased with the Latina implication. We're also going to be discussing the documented versus undocumented population. And as you can see from the PowerPoint, documented students, documented individuals have access to much more opportunities and rights than undocumented individuals. For example, the documented status of a student may have to do with their citizenship. They can either be born or naturalized citizens in this country. They are those that have a permanent residence. These individuals are eligible non-citizens also who have been given an I-94 document by the Department of Homeland Security. Documented individuals may also include persons granted asylum or refugee status, those that have been paroled into the U.S. for at least 1 year, may include battered immigrants, qualified aliens and their children, or conditional entrants such as Cuban, Haitian entrants, or victims of human trafficking. undocumented individuals have to do with those that came into this country without proper inspection or utilizing fraudulent documents. Additionally, those individuals may have entered, the country legally, but have overstayed their document window. Immigrant versus refugee, that's something that we also need to clarify. Again, immigrant refers to person with no U.S. citizenship at birth, but have made their way into this country, and that may include naturalized citizens, lawful permanent residents, refugees, and asylees, persons on certain temporary visas, and the unauthorized. These individuals are also referred as foreign-born. A refugee is someone who has been forced to flee his or her country because of persecution, war, or violence. Many refugees apply for asylum, and this is something that we have been seeing a lot lately, particularly in the last year or so, where the migrant caravans from Central and South America have been making their way into this country and seeking asylum protection from the United States. So you may be familiar with the news feeds that have been focusing on the children, particularly on the unaccompanied minors that are coming into this country as refugees seeking asylum, and the family separations that are taking place as a result. DACA is another term that is prevalent within the target population. DACA stands for Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, and this was enacted in 2012 as an executive action under President Obama. Basically, what DACA protection offers individuals who qualify is protection from deportation. The status does not grant, in most states, the opportunity to benefit from public benefits such as financial aid for students to continue their education. Currently, the current administration has stopped the DACA applications, so there are none being accepted, but the courts have allowed those individuals who are under DACA protection to continue to renew their applications and be granted as long as they meet the requirements. We're getting into the population and the Hispanic Latino population that is ever growing in this country. As of 2018, this population counted almost 60 million members, which represents an 18% of the total population in the country. More interestingly, during the time frame of 2008 and 2018, a 10-year period, the population growth among the Hispanic Latino population represented and accounted for 52% of the growth during that year period. The top states that count Hispanic Latinos as part of their population include New Mexico with 48% and Texas. Those traditional receiving states, California, as you can see from the graphic. So some more recent non-traditional states, such as Colorado, New York, and finally our state of North Carolina, which is experiencing a growing population. Again, we are 9% of the state population and continue to grow. As far as the public schools, again, our population keeps growing, and our representation can be seen at the elementary K12 level. From the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction, we see that they count 25% Latinos in the K12 population, meaning 25% of the total K12 population is identified as Hispanic Latino. What does that mean when we have a big population at the K-12 level, what kind of resources are available, what kind of services they are receiving to support their continued education and access to higher education. Well, one of the items we use to gauge progress is the dropout rates. As you can see, the high school dropout rates across the country as of 2016 includes the Hispanic population at 10%, which is great. Having come from working in the K-12 system in the state of Georgia and in the higher education university system in Georgia as well, I have been around when the dropout rate was nearly 50% for our population, especially with the migrant and seasonal farm workers that I worked with back then. So a 10% dropout rate is really wonderful to see. But as great as those figures are, you can tell how we compare with our peers, the African American population, the white population, and Asian population still have lower dropout rates than do our students. Now, along with that, we have the undocumented student population that is graduating from high school. And on a national basis, we have approximately 65,000 of those individuals graduating from high school with very few to no options for continuing their education at the next level. Additionally, the graphic here of those undocumented students, 54% have at least a high school diploma compared to 82% of the U.S. peers. Again, if we take these in a vacuum, the data looks good, but when we start comparing it to our peers, it should be unacceptable that we have that discrepancy. College enrollment, so we covered K-12 and the access. From this slide, our Latino Hispanic students are enrolling in college at an all-time high. Again, from my experience, it's wonderful to see that almost 47% of our Hispanic Latino students are enrolling in higher education, which puts us ahead or on par with our counterparts, specifically the white student population and the black student population, which lags behind the 47% enjoyed by the Hispanic and Latino and white students. The Asian student population is far and away enjoying better college enrollments at that level. But if you also look at the next column, where are these children enrolling? Where are these individuals enrolling? And by a wide margin, our Hispanic Latino students are enrolling in two-year community colleges for a variety of reasons, namely the flexibility, the accessibility, and the cost. What happens when the students do get into college? Well, unfortunately, you see from this graphic, our Hispanic Latino students are completing college at a 15% rate. Again, from my experience, that is great. We are making progress. It used to be below 10% for many years. So progress is good, but when we compare to our peers, the gap continues to grow. We see a gap between the Latinos and the black student population of 8%. That jumps greatly when we compare against the white student population, and it really is noticeable when we compare with the Asian population. So it's great that our children are getting access and are taking advantage of enrollment opportunities in higher ed, but there's a piece missing that allows the completion percentage to be so low. Again, I think we covered this a couple of slides ago, but where are we sending our Latino students to college? Again, I mentioned that the public two-year community college system benefits greatly from their enrollment for the reasons that we mentioned, namely accessibility, flexibility, and cost. You can see the public four-year universities come in second. We have the private not-for-profit, and then we have the private for-profit, which incorporates about 11%. And this is something that Juana and I discussed earlier as we were going through the data. Is that we have to really become advocates for, excuse me, parents and children to look at the other options before settling for the private for-profit institutions, because many times they don't enjoy the support that the other institutions offer. And when it's a for-profit institution, I don't think that in my personal opinion, the interest is there to get students through graduation. The for-profit institutes, schools, or other agencies are mainly, again, from my experience in higher ed, their goals are to enroll as many individuals as possible so that they can use up their financial aid. And when we have parents and children with very limited knowledge of the higher ed system, they could be taken advantage of very easily.
Thank you, Javier. Now we'll look at data and demographics for Hispanic and Latinos in North Carolina. Like Javier was saying during his piece, there has been a significant growth of the Hispanic Latino population in North Carolina. And looking at a few data, we see that during the past few years, there's been the growth. So in 1990, for example, there was a little under 80,000 Latinos in North Carolina, and now we have over 970,000 Hispanics or Latinos in North Carolina, which make up 9.6% of the total population here in the state. So we continue to see that growth, and that number is going to continue to increase. So 59% of the population are U.S. born, and those that are not U.S. born are essentially coming from Mexico, Central America, or Puerto Rico. And we do have a very young Latino population with a median age of 24. So that is a young population, and so because it's a young population, we are going to continue to see the population grow. Additionally, here in North Carolina, we have over 25,000 DACA recipients. These are not necessarily students that are, so all DACA recipients are not students that are in high school or that are in college, but a lot of them are in high school, they're in college. Some of them have graduated. Some of them are professionals working in employment. Just how Javier mentioned, DACA really opened a door for individuals to work here in North Carolina, and a lot of them did take advantage of the opportunity. So now they're professionals working. There are 5 counties that have the largest Hispanic population. Mecklenburg County with 137,000, and then we see Wake County with 105,000 Hispanic or Latinos, followed by Forsyth County with 47, and then Durham and Guilford County, they're at 41,000 Hispanic or Latinos that live in those counties. So we see the 5 counties that have the higher percentages of Latinos living in those counties. When we look at K12 education, we see that 18% of the school population is Latino or Hispanic. So there are over 370 Hispanic children in North Carolina, and keep in mind that 93% of those children are U.S. born. So most of the population of the Latino Hispanic children in the K-12 system are U.S. born, but we still have that small percentage of students that either migrating to the United States, to North Carolina, and those that were not born here that may be DACA undocumented. And those students, like Javier mentioned, do experience more challenges, hardships when trying to enroll in college just because of the limited opportunities. Between 2017 and 2019, DPI reported that there were 18,000 new students, recent immigrants that came from Central and South America. So we see this, like Javier was saying, the refugees that are entering, or just recent migrants that are coming in to the state. DPI reported there was 18,000 students that enrolled in the K-12 system between 2017 and 2019. This graphic shows just how much the numbers have grown, how much the population of Hispanic or Latinos has grown in K-12 enrollment. And something just really impactful here is that over the past 10 years, the number of Latinos in K-12 have doubled. So in 2005, there were about 8% of Hispanics were Hispanic in K-12. And then we see that in 2015, 2016, that number has doubled to 17%. So the number of Hispanic or Latinos in K-12 has doubled within the past 10 years. And we see the number for the whites has kind of decreased a little bit, while the number of Hispanic students enrolled is increasing. At attainment, just how Javier was mentioning, Hispanic students have been doing a lot better, right? We see the numbers are increasing as far as more high school completion rates, less dropout rates, but when we compare it to our counterparts, then we're still with the lowest percentage as far as high school graduation rates. When it comes to school enrollment, there are even larger or greater disparities when we look at the school enrollment numbers. In North Carolina community colleges, there's 12% of Hispanics that are enrolled, while there's 56% whites that are enrolled in the community colleges. And the disparity is even greater when we look at students that are enrolling into the UNC system. We see that only 6% of Latino students are enrolling in UNC system schools versus 57% of whites that are enrolling. And here is just a visual, just kind of give you a visual of the numbers that we just shared with you. And again, you can see the disparities, you can see the gaps. Remember that there are 18%, or in K-12, there are 18% Hispanic Latinos that are enrolled. So if you look at that number of students that are enrolled in K-12 and compare it to the number of students, or the percentage of students that are enrolling into the UNC system, there's a large gap there. There's a huge disparity. Carolina, adults with any post-secondary education, we see that Hispanics have the lower percentages, and it just having any type of post-secondary education. And this graphic here shows, again, the differences of, American Indian, Asian, Black, Hispanic, those with two or more races and whites, and the educational attainment that these groups have. And so here we see that Hispanics, there's 20% of Hispanic or Latinos that have at least an associate's degree. So Hispanics have the lowest percentages when it comes to educational attainment. And we're going to talk a little bit about what are those challenges, like why is it that maybe students aren't going to college, they aren't enrolling or even finishing. And so I'm going to pass it on to my colleague Javier to share some of these challenges that students may present in facing and accessing higher education.
Yes. Thank you, Juana. So as you can see from this slide, there are many obstacles that this particular population faces in accessing higher education. And most of them have a hint of truth to it. One of the things that we would like to do through this webinar is to provide you, the advocates at the school level or the community level, with the tools and the information to decipher some of this information and maybe counter the myths that they present for these students and their families. Number one, most students and families feel that their status, particularly the undocumented status or any other that they may have, may prevent them from attending college. That may be technically true, but there are resources for students to access higher education. Their status alone, whether it's undocumented or unauthorized, um, or others that prevent them from accessing state and federal financial aid resources. The status itself does not prohibit them from enrolling in higher education. So there are resources out there. Advocates such as yourself, such as us, are constantly looking for them so that we can provide them those opportunities. Again, as I mentioned earlier, cost is a big factor. The majority of the population, the Latino Hispanic population that I work with through my work with East Coast Migrant Head Start Project and in my previous work and higher ed, dealt with the farm workers, the first generation students, first generation families in this country that did not have the financial resources to invest in higher education. Again, educating students and families on what's out there really goes a long way to easing the financial burden and the financial perception that it is an impossibility because of their economic situation. Fear of being disclosed or even deportation is a very real fear. Uh, Family separations are going on everywhere. You turn on the news, you can see families being separated, those that are in mixed status. So that is a real fear that families live with, that individuals live with, especially when wanting to make themselves so public by enrolling and attending an institution of higher education. Uh, Not understanding the process is also a great barrier, particularly for the families that I just described, when there is not one that can be a point of reference when they are the first ones, the students are the first ones attempting to go to college or university. The process itself can be daunting if they don't have support from advocates at the school system or community level to walk them through it. And so the thought of just enrolling and filling out the tons of paperwork or doing it electronically can be daunting and could be cause for giving up when students and families are not fully sold on the idea. Housing is a big issue, is a big expense. And the institutional structures, if they're not set up to support these non-traditional, and I refer to them even if they are high school graduates enrolling in higher ed. They're still non-traditional in the sense that they don't have anybody that walked before them. They don't know how to navigate the system. And if institutions aren't set up to support those kind of individuals, then the student could easily not fulfill their dream of enrollment. The other thing is to look at, in terms of supporting their financial outlook, look at what the financial aid tuition and the colleges offer in terms of support for these individuals, whether there are financial aid nights where they have, more importantly, bilingual support for these families so that parents can be included in the process and understand the financial responsibilities that they and the students have. Explaining tuition goes a long way. There are many instances where I've had conversations with parents and they tell me that they want their children to go to college, they want their children to better themselves, they want them to take advantage of opportunities, but the cost is what many times prevents them from even enrolling. And once we explain the tuition process, the actual cost, and bring it to them at the level that they can understand, they can then are better prepared to make those decisions instead of thinking that it's going to be thousands and thousands of dollars for their son or daughter to go to college. We bring it out to the level of the actual cost and the options of staying on campus versus commuting and the cost savings that that provides. So having all this information to counter the barriers that students and parents may have goes a long way for them to be better informed and take advantage of what's there. One of the last ones on here that really caught my attention and I wanted to speak to was the limited or lack of representations of Latino faculty and staff and administration. And that's across the board, even at the K-12 level. But it's even, in my view, more critical at the higher education level, where individuals, especially first-generation students, need to feel a sense of belonging. I've seen this with other populations as well, particularly the African American population that I work with, is that if they don't see themselves represented, they don't have that sense of belonging, and they will not acclimate as quickly to that environment and will most unlikely be looking for an excuse to go back home. So it's very important that institutions really pay attention to having diverse representation at all levels of their college or university. The first generation students, and that is very critical that we understand what drives these students. The overwhelming aspect that I think of when I think of first generation college student is the lack of college growing culture, the lack of preparation that they have. They would not have that point of reference to guide them. Having gone through just recently on a personal level with our son graduating from high school and going through the college selection process and all of that entails, the process is very daunting, even for someone that has worked in higher ed, someone that has the more options to offer our son. I remember, again, coming from that background and being the first in my family of 9 children to have opportunity to go to college. I didn't have anybody to turn to ask basic questions about what that experience was going to be like. Mostly because there's nobody around, mostly because there was no support system in place. And if it hadn't been for advocates at the K-12 level that walked me through it, that took me to my first orientation on campus, that supported that process along the way, I would not be where I am today. But paying attention to the experiences of first generation non-English speaking, low socioeconomic students, which defines for the most part our Latino Hispanic population in the state, it really go a long way to encouraging their success in applying for and succeeding in higher education. So these are just some of the additional obstacles that we as advocates and champions need to consider and work against to provide that base of support that is very much needed within the population. Um, Many of our Latino Hispanic students that come from that background have to make very difficult choices, some that should not be placed on their shoulders, but because of the nature of the family dynamics and their socioeconomic status, it is thrust upon them when they continue to go to school, invest 4 years in studying and educating themselves versus going to work and having an immediate impact on family income. Those are the kind of things that we have to be ready for, we have to be supportive of, and again, including the whole family in these conversations so that they can see what the long-term investment payout will be if they forego immediate contributions from their children in lieu of having them off to get a college education.
So next we're going to be talking about supporting Hispanic Latino immigrant students, and we're going to cover 7 main concepts or practices. So embracing, valuing, learning, sharing, engaging, supporting, and advocating. So Javier is going to share the first practice or concept, and he has a success story that he is going to share just about his story and why it's so important, why embracing and valuing diversity and cultural backgrounds of students is important.
Yes, as I mentioned earlier, uh, I come from a family of 9 children. My family came into this country as migrant farm workers, so we worked in the fields since I can remember. I was probably 6 years old when we started migrating to work in the crops. And that led me on a path that unfortunately is still the norm for that population of children. Is disrupting their education, having a harder time catching up, and really discouraging the academic success because of the different barriers that particular lifestyle provides. But one of the great things that happened as well, and believe me, I'm not complaining of my background because it taught me many life lessons at a very early age that helped me grow to the person that I am today. But the difference was having those advocates at the school system and within the community, individuals such as myself, uh, to be able to access higher ed, to be able to access resources that would support me, to be able to have that conversation with my parents and with my siblings about moving off to college, being away from home, being not being part of the income contribution team that was expected, but having them see the big picture, having them see the long-term benefits, which to their credit, they were very supportive of. But it took it took some advocacy on behalf of myself and those champions within the school and the community. And some of those lessons I'm highlighting here from my personal experience is how do we support these individuals? How do we support these families? Well, number one, if you're in the school system or in the community, I would encourage you to embrace and value the cultural background of all of your students. Not no two individuals are alike, and I hate to stereotype by saying, they're Latino, they're Hispanic, their parents are this way or they are this way, and this is what we should expect. No, I would hope that all of us take the time to understand the individuals on a personal level, understand the student, understand the parents, and understand their fears, their what keeps them awake at night as it relates to the family dynamics, and be prepared to hear more things that you would want to know. Once families get to that level of trust with a community advocate, with a school champion, and they will share their utmost fears from family situations to their undocumented status. And we have to consider all of that when we are advising or guiding students, because students, for the most part, that come from this background do not make these decisions in a vacuum. It is all a family affair, and the more information and more communication we have with families, the better they will be prepared to make those decisions, because it impacts the family as a whole, not just the individual, which is a big culture shift from the traditional middle class student that is making their decision to go to college. Many times they do the legwork, they have those conversations, they do the campus visits on their own with limited to no family involvement per se. This is a total shift from that experience, and the more we are prepared to understand that as school personnel, as community advocates, the better we can guide them. To wrap this slide up, just create an open and welcome environment for these individuals and their families in a non-judgmental zone that is supportive of their decision. And again, if their decision is the child needs to work because they have different situations that require that. For now, I would encourage you to be supportive of that as well, and also continue to follow up with them, because that is what happened in my situation. I dropped out of high school. I went to work to support the family, worked in the fields, travel around to several states. And it wasn't until 3 years later that I was encouraged to go back to school, go into college, and at that time I was able to do that. But when I first dropped out of school, I could not make that decision because there were family needs that needed to be addressed. And those people that were supporting me understood that. And every year they would come back as we would move into the little community to pick the vegetables that were in season. They would come out and follow up to see if I was ready to take the next step. And it took 3 years for me to do that and take advantage of it. Be respectful of the family needs, but also make sure that we follow up and keep in close contact. So we let them know that we are here for them when that opportunity and when they're ready.
Very important strategy is taking the time to learn about the policies and laws affecting Hispanic, Latino, or immigrant students' access to education. As educators and just as professionals working with this population or working with immigrant students, it's very important that we take the time to learn about how the different policies, state policies and federal policies are affecting students' access to education. So I really do encourage you all to take time, if you don't know what DACA is, to take a little bit of time to learn about DACA. If you don't understand the differences between an undocumented or documented student, what are the differences? If you don't understand the process and how individuals can become residents or citizens, take the time to learn those things. You'd be surprised at the different comments that I have just heard in working with individuals across the state. And I just really encourage you all to take the time to understand the students, the laws and policies so that you can support the students that you are working with. So just learn about relevant state, local legislation that affects students, especially those related to higher education. So make sure that you know who is and is not eligible for financial aid to receive federal or state funding. Understand residency determination services policies and how that affects your students. Take the time to see whether there are different other pathways for your students who may not be eligible for financial aid, or maybe they're attending us out of state. And keep in mind that with RDS, there are a different type of visas and statuses that could be eligible to go to school as in-state. So if you're working with a student who may not be eligible for financial aid, that doesn't mean that they're not eligible to enroll as a resident. So familiarize yourself with RDS, the policies, and who is eligible. In addition, learn about admissions policies at your private institutions, four-year institutions, in addition to the community college institutions. And we are going to be having a webinar that's going to be focused on how students who maybe are going to school as out of state, what are those community college exceptions? Like what can be done for students that are here on a visa, or what are some other pathways for students to enroll in community college and potentially enroll as residents if they meet certain qualifications. And again, we will have a webinar on the North Carolina college community college exemptions. And you can definitely learn about those policies there. And keep in mind that here in North Carolina, there is no law prohibiting students from enrolling to college. And so like Javier mentioned earlier, some students believe that because they're undocumented, because they have DACA, they can't get accepted to college. They can't go to college. And so tell them that they can, encourage them to apply. Now there are some schools, private institutions that are offering very generous financial aid packets. So just, again, take time to learn about the policies and laws that are affecting the students. One thing that I've seen a lot in working with students is many times parents are not filing their taxes correctly, or they're not filing their taxes for whatever reasons. A lot of times it can be that they don't know that they have to file. They don't know that they can get a tax identification number. But there are tax laws that are affecting students who are eligible. This is mostly with students who are U.S. citizens or have an eligible status to receive financial aid. Many times their parents may be filing incorrectly or they may not file. And so that can affect the student's eligibility for financial aid. Just make sure that you are, take a little bit of time to learn about tax laws. I know that, we're like, well, that's not our job. We're, counselors, or we're, trying to help students go to college. But if you can take a little bit of time, how that can affect students, I think that would really help make a difference as you're guiding students.
So we cover some best practices for supporting these students. As I mentioned, the main thing is to get to know your students on a personal level and engage the family and the community champions. Many times families may have a great relationship with someone in the community that can be your there's a gatekeeper where they can bring you into the family. They can establish that trust. Many times it's a religious leader that is supportive of the family and advocating for the family. So these best practices just highlight developing and enhancing that relationship with the family, making sure that we include them by providing information that is in a language that the parents can understand, not just the student. And you understand the whole family dynamics, and that is key when we are providing resources for them. If we don't know their documented status, we may be providing them information that they can't really take advantage of. So we build up hopes, and then we find out, oh, you're not eligible for this. So really take the time to understand where they are with their status, with their economic situation, and guide them appropriately, because it's nothing worse than building up hopes for the students and the parents and then finding out that they may not be able to take advantage of them for something that we could have prevented early on.
To that, it's very important that you engage the families whenever you're working with the students. So supporting the students and the families and navigating the higher education process when they're applying to college, when they're applying for financial aid, when they're completing residency determination. Like Javier mentioned earlier, many times the families are not going to understand or even know that they have to complete financial aid if they're eligible, that they have to do residency determination. And then there's that fear, like, oh, there's a federal document. You're asking me to enter my information here. What is going to happen? Am I going to get in trouble? What is that going to mean for my future, for my family? Same whenever they are completing RDS, residency determination, that fear is there. So making sure that you're working with the families, you're communicating with them the purpose, why they have to complete it, how that's going to benefit the children. And then also, I just, really love that Javier said, you want to make sure that you know the students, so that you're not telling them, oh yeah, you can get this much money in financial aid, or, you're eligible. And then whenever it's time for them to do their financial aid application, then we realize that they're not eligible because they don't have a Social Security or they're DACA. And so it's very important that those conversations take place with the students, with the families. But I cannot emphasize enough how important it is to involve the families in this process. And so it makes a huge difference. It helps the families feel more comfortable, more confident, especially if it's somebody in the community that they trust. Many times they will, they believe that individual in the community that tells them, it's okay to do this, everything's going to be fine. And so make sure that you are engaging them and involving the parents. Some ideas, whenever you're holding events for Spanish speakers, you can hold FAFSA Day events. You can have Hispanic college nights. You can have admissions information sessions in Spanish. I've traveled the state and I've seen some really, really successful events take place in Pitt Community College. They have FAFSA Day. A Mexican is a part of FAFSA Day that they host there in the county as well. Surrey County Community College, they host a very successful Hispanic college night where they bring in different community partners and they talk to parents and families, and they always have close to 100 participants. Montgomery Community College just had their FAFSA Day event at their college. And so it's a really great way to get the parents to come, get the students to come, get them both engaged and involved in the process. And so just, be creative, whatever local resources that you have in your communities. Make sure that you are connecting with them, particularly if it's somebody that the parents and students are already familiarized with, someone that already has a relationship with them. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can connect with them. And just, really do take the time to build those positive relationships and be intentional. Be intentional about developing those relationships with the students and the families.
If I can add to that, Juana, be prepared also for students to share that they may not be aware that they may not be eligible for these financial aid opportunities. We've had students, and I've had experiences where sitting down with a high school senior and talking about higher ed options, we find out that they aren't eligible, they don't have a social security number, or they had a social security number that was not a legitimate number because they were brought in as children, or because whatever, this is the only lifestyle, this is the only culture that they have known. And many times, or sometimes I've had parents that have just kept that information from their children, and it comes to light when we are filling out college application and financial aid forms that the information that they have is not legitimate, or that the child was led to believe that they did have all these documentation, and the reality was that they were not. So just be ready to deal with that. And again, come full circle about getting to know your student, getting to know the family at that level.
All right, so the final point that we have here, or strategy, is advocating for dual enrollment opportunities for students. And these opportunities are typically open to all students regardless of their citizenship status. So there's Career and College Promise. So Career and College Promise, every time I visit a school, I have a parent night, I always talk about Career and College Promise. It's a really great way for any student, and particularly for DACA and documented students, or students that would not be eligible to enroll at the in-state as residents, or students who are not eligible for financial aid. It's a really great way for them to earn free college credits while they are in high school. So encouraging them, and I will say that many times when I do talk to the students, when I talk to the parents, they don't know that this opportunity is available at their school. They don't know that this opportunity is there. And it may be that no one is talking to them about it. It may be that they get the information, they don't understand it. Or it may be that their children are not talking about it to the parents. So just be intentional and make sure that parents know that they understand the opportunity is there, but also talking to the students about it. Also, just, there are other type of things that students can do in high school. For example, they can take AP classes, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that. But, just really advocating for dual enrollment opportunities, any college preparation strategy for undocumented and DACA students that is going to save them money. And we're going to talk a little bit about that now. But, understanding and knowing what opportunities are out there, and then advocating and helping your students, encouraging them to enroll into those opportunities, such as Career and College Promise, AP, and exploring local community college programs. So now we're going to jump into college planning strategies. So here we'll mainly explore strategies to minimize overall costs, particularly for DACA and undocumented or immigrant students. And this could be, this can, relate or pertains to any student. But when you're working with DACA undocumented students, these are some strategies that may help to minimize the overall costs. It may help to minimize the overall cost. So we see there is, again, dual enrollment programs like Career and College Promise, encouraging your students to enroll in those programs, particularly if they have the resources, if they're able to go, have the transportation, have the resources to enroll in those programs. And if not, they could do it through, AP classes. There's also the College Board's college level examination program, which is similar to AP classes, but with the CLEP program, this is for anyone of any age. Anyone can take a CLEP exam and take the exam, and so they're placing out of college classes. There are about 33 exams that individuals can take through the CLEP program, and so as long as the school or the colleges are accepting those exams or accepting those credits, then the student should be fine. So I encourage that if you're talking to your students about the CLEP exam, that you are asking the student to check with their college's policy on CLEP examinations. So, again, it's a really great opportunity for them to take an exam. They'll take it, they'll place out of a college credit or a college class, and they'll be able to earn college credit. And so I encourage you again to learn more about the CLEP and see if that's an option for your students. And it's about $87 per exam, but when you compare it to the actual cost of taking a class at college, is a lot more affordable. There's also the North Carolina Community College exemptions. And I'm not going to go into detail with these today because we are going to have a webinar that's going to be focused on reviewing all of these. But the one that I did want to emphasize is a business sponsorship for DACA students or individuals that are here with a work permit. So if, let's say, for example, if a DACA student is working for an employer, the DACA student can actually talk to the employer about sponsoring them for college. And if the employer agrees, they will have to submit documentation with the community college, and then the employer is actually charged at the in-state rate. So it's a really great way for a student to talk to employers. The employer will sponsor them, and instead of paying the out-of-state tuition, the employer would pay at the in-state rate because it's billed directly through the employer. If this is an option that your student or that you want to explore with your student, I encourage you to call your local community college, learn what their policy is around the business sponsorship, what documentation is needed, what are the steps, and what is the process. So it's very important that they do their research first before going to that employer with the information. And we will cover the other ones, but there's a business and military, transfer families exemption, there's a nonprofit tuition exemption, there's a public school graduates, refugee, non-resident of the U.S. exemption, and then federal law enforcement officers exemption. So again, we invite you to join the webinar that's going to be focused on these topics. We really encourage students to look into their local community colleges. There are a lot of great programs, a lot of great opportunities. Like Javier was mentioning, there's flexibility as well. but there's different areas that they can look into. There's continuing education. So with continuing education, students can enroll and there's no in-state or out-of-state. It's the same fee for everyone, and these courses are a lot, like, very affordable. And the really, again, cool thing is that they don't have in-state or out-of-state fees. Same fee for everybody, and students can actually go and take a course, like enroll in a continuing education course and earn a certification and some type of program that they're interested in. It may be HVAC, it may be cosmetology, it may be any type of certification that the school offers. And so enrolling in these programs are very affordable for students. They're short programs. And so they're able to, graduate with the certification in a short amount of time, and then they can go straight into the workforce, or they can look into diploma or associate's degrees or the transfer program. And we're not going to go into detail here because we are also going to have a webinar that's going to be focused on the different type of programs at the local community college or at the community colleges in North Carolina. And we also invite you to join us for that one, just so you can learn a little bit more about the differences between continuing ed, diploma, or an associate's degree, the transfer program, and how students can benefit from all of these. But for students that are just really struggling to pay for college, a community college is a really great option, even if they enroll as a part-time student. When I talk to students, I'll say, well, how much can you afford? How much are you able to pay? And if they're able to pay for 2 classes, then I encourage them to do 2 classes. So they don't have to enroll as full-time students. They can pay out of pocket whatever they are able to afford, and just making sure that they're talking to the community college, that they're meeting with people, making sure that they have someone that they can talk to. That's helping them through the process. Additionally, local community colleges and see if they have any type of reduced or free tuition program. For example, Central Carolina Promise, which is Central Carolina Community College, they have a Promise program for students. So here, if the students meet the qualifications, they can get their tuition paid for, or they can get a part of their tuition paid for. There's also Durham Tech Promise through Durham Tech Community College, or also the Connect Fund. So check with your local community college to see what type of programs are available. Is there a program at your community college that is helping or supporting students pay for college? Also, Haywood Community College has something similar. So again, just making sure that you are aware, you familiarize yourself with different free reduced or free tuition programs. NC Promise is a really great opportunity for students that may have DACA, undocumented, or that are having to enroll out of state as out of state students. They're not eligible for financial aid, and these are also really great options for North Carolina residents. So with the NC Promise, North Carolina residents are able to enroll and only pay $500 for the tuition per semester. And then for out-of-state individuals, the cost is $2,500 per semester, which is really affordable when you compare it to other schools, especially those that are having to pay out-of-state. So those 3 schools that are participating in NC Promise are UNC Pembroke, Elizabeth City, and Western Carolina. And so again, if you're working with students that are either living in this area or that may want to pursue a 4-year degree, then these are some options that would be very affordable, where they, again, in-state it's $500, out-of-state is $2,500. Also with the NC Promise schools, I've learned that if they have enough college credits, let's say they have some credits to community college, or maybe while they were in high school they earned enough credits to transfer into one of these schools, if they have enough college credits, that they can actually transfer and do online programs. So for students that can't drive to the schools, maybe they're too far, they may be able to take online courses and earn their degree online. So again, it's a matter of doing the research, trying to see if their programs are available and how that works, but it is an option for some students. Private institutions, there are a number of private institutions that are offering very generous financial aid packets for students. For some DACA and undocumented students, private institutions, for some of them, may be the best option. particularly if they are wanting to enroll into a four-year school. And I'll show you a list towards the end of this PowerPoint of schools that are supporting students as they're enrolling into the colleges. Applying for scholarships is huge. There's institutional scholarships, state scholarships, national and local scholarships. There are scholarships that are particularly for DACA or undocumented students, and I'll share a list with you all there. But just making sure that you are learning about the different type of scholarships that are out there, that are available, and that you're sharing that information with your students, and that you make the scholarships visible for students that may have DACA or undocumented, that may be too nervous to share, well, I'm undocumented or I'm DACA. Have them in a location in your office where they can see it, where they can come to your office, and if they'll see the scholarship, they might ask, and it might spark a conversation with students as far as paying for college or college. Encourage students and their parents to connect with admissions or financial aid offices, particularly those that work with multicultural students or international students, to ask about scholarship opportunities. There are a lot of schools that are offering institutional scholarships. Some schools now have scholarships open available for DACA or undocumented students. So there is more and more initiative from the colleges and universities to provide scholarships for students that are DACA or undocumented. So take the time to learn what are those your colleges, local colleges offering, what scholarships are available, but also connecting parents and students with people from those campuses that can help them. So for example, Appalachian State, they have a bilingual Spanish admissions representative. UNC Greensboro, they have a whole team of bilingual admissions representatives as well. And Guilford College has an immigrant student coordinator on those campuses. So take the time as an educator to familiarize yourself with what resources are available at your local community colleges, at your colleges, whether they're four-year private schools, what are the schools that students are wanting to go to, and take the time to do some research on what opportunities may be available. There's also exploring online colleges. So the Mexican consulate, they have a program where Mexican nationals are able to take online courses from here and take courses from a university in Mexico. And so it's another option that your students may have when they're Mexican. Some other consulates, they may have something similar, but it's definitely an option that students can explore. Let's jump into the resources. So Countdown to College, we just recently translated the Countdown to College website. We have a section in Spanish for parents and students. Please refer your parents and students to this website. We have really great information. We have a lot of resources that we have included here that are bilingual for the parents and students. And so this will be a really great way for them to understand what are the different steps in applying to college, right? They'll learn about residency determination. They'll learn about FAFSA. They'll learn about college applications. So please, your students and parents to this website as you're working with them. Additionally, I'm not going to go into detail with this because we're going to have a webinar that is focused on residency determination, but I do want you to know that we have resources on cfnc.org. We have resources on ncresidency.org where you can find all of these documents. So we have resources on how a student should fill out the RDS online interview if they're DACA or if they're undocumented. If a student has a U.S. If a student is a U.S. citizen with undocumented parents, what are the steps and the processes that they should follow when filling out RDS? And so I encourage you to take the time to look through all of these documents. The resources that we have online should be very helpful for you all. Also, understanding the steps for how to complete a FAFSA is very important, particularly for students who are U.S. citizens or eligible non-citizens. They are able to complete a FAFSA, and so here this outlines the steps that they should take. In our next webinar, we will be talking in more detail what are the steps, what are the processes, but just know that we do have a one-pager on our website on cfnc.org under resources where you can find the steps on how to complete a FAFSA, especially if your students have undocumented parents. We have a financial basics course that's focused on budgeting, talks about credit reports, financial health, and so this is a course that anyone in high school or first year college students can take. And so if they pass the course, I believe they have to earn an 80% or higher, then they will automatically be entered into a college scholarship drawing. And so this here is available for DACA and undocumented students. I mean, we will be having the Spanish version soon. So please encourage your students to participate in the financial basics, to take the course. And again, they will be able to enter a scholarship drawing if they do complete it. List of the North Carolina independent colleges and universities that are offering financial assistance to DACA and undocumented students. I did want to share that this list was compiled by the North Carolina State Education Assistance Authority. They created a survey and they sent it out to all the colleges that are independent colleges, asking them what kind of support are they offering students and do they offer support. And these are the schools that responded to the survey. I'm not saying that these are the only schools that are offering support to undocumented students because I know that there are other schools that are supporting the students. They just didn't respond to the surveys and they didn't make it to this list. But you can call your local private institutions to see what type of support or resources they have available. Here are some scholarship resources that you can share with your students and parents. Some of these scholarships are for DACA or undocumented students, and then others, they do require residency or citizenship. So you'll have to look through the different scholarship resources. Just more resources that you all can take a look at during your time, and some of the data and information that I shared, that Javier and I shared in this PowerPoint, you can find it by looking at these links as well. Contact your local CFNC regional representative. There are 8 other representatives or 7 other representatives across the state of North Carolina that can come to your counties and they can do presentations and with counselors, presentation with students. None of them are bilingual, so if you want something in Spanish, you would have to contact me. But one thing that I did want to add is for those of you that may not be that familiar with CFNC, just know that we have all of our resources are free, and we encourage students to create an account, and then we encourage you all to get on CFNC, look at all of our great resources. We have great information on planning, applying, and paying for college that you can share with your students. And all of these representatives, they all have a wealth of knowledge. They've been there for years. And so we are happy to come out to your schools or work with you all if you need us. So just here is the schedule of the webinars that we will be hosting. On October 7th at 3:30 p.m., we will be having the webinar on understanding the financial aid process for Hispanic and immigrant families from a public and private institution. We will have a representative from Meredith College and a representative from Montgomery Community College who's going to be who will be providing the webinar. On October 28th, Shannon Byers will be providing a webinar on residency determination services. On November 12th, we will have a webinar that is going to be focused on the policies and opportunities for Latina students in various non-U.S. statuses at North Carolina community colleges. This is a webinar where we will discuss the different community college exemptions. So if you want to learn about the different community college exemptions and the policies, we encourage you to join this webinar. On November 26th, we will have some representatives from Wake Tech Community College to talk about the differences between career training, higher ed options for all students. And so they're going to be talking about the different type of programs and degrees that community colleges offer and how immigrant students are able to benefit from these programs and what are some strategies or best practices for students that are wanting to enroll into these programs. And then lastly, on December 11th, we have a webinar that's going to be focused on building trust and relationships. And this is going to be provided by Sarah Wright, who works at Surrey Community College. So as you can see, these webinars really were a true partnership between different organizations, institutions across the state of North Carolina. And we are hoping that these webinars will really help in supporting you as you're guiding the students and help answer any questions, concerns, or doubts that you all have. So we do encourage you and invite you to join the future webinars that we will be hosting. Connected, we have our CFNC page. I have a Facebook page, Juana at CFNC. I post scholarship information there all the time, and so we invite you to follow us on social media and stay updated on all the great resources that we have. So that concludes our webinar. I want to give a special thanks to Javier Gonzalez for joining us today and for sharing his knowledge and his story. Thank you so much, Javier. You are greatly, greatly appreciated. And I want to thank you all for joining this webinar, for joining us today, and we hope to see you at the next webinar. Thank you.